This is an interview I did with Alexa from Zero Shoes. Enjoy.
Okay, so our guest today, our partner, born to run coach, elite athlete, amazing, incredible partner, Eric Orton. Welcome, Eric.
How's it
Hey,
going? I'm good.
good. Yeah, so I'm really excited to kick this off. You have been very passionate about Zero Shoes. Anyone can check out Eric's YouTube videos where it's all about Zero Shoes and a lot of other running tips, but I like that we see Zero Shoes in a lot of his videos. So Eric, I am curious. I feel like a lot of people knew Chris McDougall's story, Born to Run. It was about Chris, and you were the coach in the background. When we've talked, you've been like, a lot of people forget about the coach. I want to hear your story. Like, how did you become the Born to Run coach? How'd you get into running? Let's start there.
Well, starting there goes way back to probably my earliest memories. I was always a runner for a variety of reasons. And some of my first vivid memories are, in elementary school on field day where you had to do it was at the 100-yard dash and jumping, the broad jump, and
Mhm.
just all these fun little stuff we do as kids. And I was, just kind of remember loving that, but I was also, you know, kind of the faster guy. um, and that led to doing track and field in high school and football. I was actually a sprinter, which kind of laid the foundation for a lot of what has helped me form my so-called philosophy for endurance running. And we can get into later if we want. But yeah, did track and field and football, played football in college, and then after college decided to move west, which was one of my better decisions in life. And that's when I moved to Denver. And shortly after that was I think it was the 1992 Leadville 100, when I first started to hear about the Tarahumara Indians who came to the Leadville 100 to run the 100-mile race. And that's when I first started to hear about these runners from Mexico. And at the same time, I'm like diving into this whole endurance world that I really kind of had, no experience with, that gave me a path to exceed or extend my athletics past college.
Mhm.
And just kind of dove into ultra running, trail running, triathlon, adventure racing. So I raced all through the 90s, experimenting with all these variety of races. And yeah, it's a long story, but I'll cut it short there, where ultimately I decided that the only thing I'm good at is athletics. I kind of stumbled around upon a couple jobs and went back to school even to thinking that was going to be the answer, but ultimately decided that coaching was my path and what I was meant to do. And I was one of the first coaching classes at the Olympic Center in Colorado Springs for triathlon, which kind of springboarded my career path with coaching, and also was one of the few who really pioneered online coaching at that time, when the internet started to become a way to coach people anywhere and really efficiently and in a cheap manner. Um, and so that kind of just led me to this coaching path that I've been on now for 25 plus years, and which, you want me to keep going? This is a
No.
long story. Which also ultimately led to Chris McDougall being commissioned by Men's Journal magazine to do a story on my coaching, which is when we met, which ultimately became that next path down the Born to Run route, and how we eventually hooked up to not only coach together for Born to Run, but also go down to the Copper Canyon and race together.
Yeah, so I'm really curious when you heard about the Tarahumaras in the 90s, and they were probably running barefoot at that time, right? And maybe the shoes were not quite the way they are now. So did you watch them or hear about them at Leadville, or like when you saw Chris and then just be like, I'm taking off my shoes and I'm doing it? Or did you start researching and studying a lot?
To be honest, back then, what was going on? You got to remember, there was no such thing as this back then,
Oh, true, true.
and there was no internet back then. So how we found our races was in the weekly publication at the newsstand, and you
Mhm,
looked at the back of the newspaper to find all these local races,
mhm,
and you're also reading in print about the races. So when I first heard about the Tarahumara Indians, it was more about, these are people who run hundreds and hundreds of miles
mhm,
in sandals. And so that combination of, wow, what's on their feet and that they're running hundreds and hundreds of miles, it, you know, well, that was like just really new to me and something that really sparked my interest. From just at that point, it was more out of, I want to be like them more than anything,
mhm,
and this lifestyle part of it, as far as outside of the performance end of it. So, um, and then so that was also part of the mystique about these people, because you couldn't just go on the internet and read about them. It was like you're hearing little bits and pieces of them, and you go to the race and they would race by, and that's all you'd see of them.
mhm,
So it was this mystique that I think started creating some of the real, kind of, I want to be like them, because there wasn't a whole lot of information about them.
that makes sense. So when you went down there, that was really, I mean, obviously the internet was a little bit more popular, I think, then, because what year was that in, prior to 2009, like in 2008
We
or
went down in 2006.
2006? Okay.
Yeah.
So you
So
go down there and you had your regular shoes, like, is that?
yeah. So um I had, prior to that, so I'll back up a little bit. So I became a full-time coach in 2002. My wife and I moved to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and that's when I went full-time coaching. And this is what I'm doing. So at that point, and prior to that, I'd always trained some athletes in person, and it's kind of more of what you would consider personal training
Mhm,
and strength training. And so I'd always train them barefoot, because I started to see how being in a shoe affected how their movements worked, good and bad. So I saw, hey, that they have a hard time moving this way with their shoes on. Let's take it off. And now we strip everything down and we use our feet for stabilization, which that was really my aha moment of, everything starts at the feet.
mhm,
And then that just, once I had that in my mind and started to see how I can start to train the feet with how I have my athletes move, but then specifically train the feet with exercises and with shoe choices,
mhm.
that really was the big, um the big catalyst to really understanding what true strength was for runners.
Mhm. Yeah, the strength in runners is something I'm very interested in. Um, I feel like ran up. I grew up running and did, the mile fun runs with the family. My mom was a personal trainer, so I actually, for like a young runner, was probably doing way more strength than averages. Like in cross country, they would have you do a few moves before your meet, but
Right.
like no structured, like, hey, let's work on glute and hip stabilization. Let's practice with your feet. And then it was like everyone wanted to wear track spikes for like our track days, but no training to ensure that our feet and our muscles were strong. So like I remember I never did, but I had a lot of teammates who would get shin splints. And, now in retrospect, it's probably because there were some strength misalignments there. But yeah.
Well, and that's, for me, goes back to my whole foundation as an athlete. When
Mhm.
I got into coaching endurance and just getting into the endurance world myself, I was like blown away that there is no fundamental teaching
Mhm.
and emphasis on form and strength, because I was a sprinter, and we're talking about hundreds of seconds. So we just whittled that movement down to make up as many gains as possible here in a 10-11 second race. But now we're talking 100 miles or a marathon event, and no one's talking about this, no one's teaching it, when now you're taking tens of thousands of steps. It just blew my mind. And so I'm like, I'm just taking what I know and putting that into the endurance world. And it's still not where it should be.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned that speed primed you for your endurance training. And it's funny because endurance athletes, and I'll speak as myself, after high school track and field was over, I did not run like any sort of sprints. I was just like, oh, I'm doing half marathons. And then I'm like, oh, I'm going to do a 50K. Why would I ever want to sprint? Like, there's no point because I'm going to be running for this amount of time. But talk about why it is actually really important fundamentally for whether you're an ultra runner or running like a 10K or something to have that sprint and speed element.
Yeah, I mean, the faster we run, the more muscle fibers we recruit.
Mhm.
And the more muscle fibers we recruit and use, the more efficient we become. So even though you might be running a marathon or an ultra marathon or any endurance type of race, the more efficient you can become, the more muscle fibers you can train your body to recruit, the better. But that only can take place when you're running really, really fast. And there's a lot of strength that goes involved with that. The faster we run, we tend to have better form. The more elasticity we use, the more muscle stiffness and leg stiffness we generate. All these are a good thing. Muscle stiffness doesn't sound like a good thing, but it's a very, very good thing. And so this really can be amplified by doing sprints or 10-15 second faster runs that are really fun to do, and they don't have to be fatigue inducing like other harder workouts. So we can do them quite frequently. And I want to point out that these are different than what we hear people doing strides.
Okay.
Strides, I think, kind of, it's just a poor word. If I say do some strides or do some sprints, you just intuitively have two different pictures in your head. And so
That's so
when we
right. Yeah.
yeah, so you know I think the purpose is the same, but I think people don't really understand truly what a stride should be.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like in my mind, when we did, I feel like I'm only referencing my high school career, but
Yeah.
it's like when I did strides, I would think of it as maybe doing 60% speed and doing really long
Right.
steps, which is counterintuitive because that means you're overstriding.
Right. Right.
And
Yep.
whereas, yeah, a sprint, you would want it to be fast but short and quick, and then like landing right under your body. Is that how you
Exactly.
like what is yeah, when you're telling your athletes, is that how you
So
word it?
yeah, when we're talking about this specific purpose, it's a 10 to 15 to 20 second type of effort. So again, very, very short, relatively fast. And for all the reasons you described, everything lands underneath you. We're training that neuromuscular system to turn over your legs very quickly. That also produces lubrication in your body. So
Oh,
it,
tell me more
and
about
so
that.
so that, yeah, the faster we run in this environment in this type of way, our bodies produce chemicals that act as lubrication. So now you're going to feel good.
Mhm.
Okay. And so again, it can be used in that way too, to really keep us feeling healthy. You know, people think, this is going down a whole different rabbit hole, but often people think injuries are recreated by doing speed work, where most times I see the majority of dysfunction and injuries that take place are when we're running slow and easy and long.
That sounds like
And so
amazing.
that's the purpose. Another purpose of doing the sprints is that we're training our body to feel good and to have that turnover.
And when would you recommend that, if we were talking about a structure for someone of any level, they're not training for anything. Like right now, I'm not training for anything. You and I are working on a lot of fundamentals together. And we're starting to add in the speed work. So for a regular runner, what do you recommend as far as when to do it in the run, and then how many times a week to do it? And how can they measure that they're being successful in making a difference?
I think the best answer is anytime.
Okay.
And I say that not every day, not every run, but keep it fresh and keep it fun. If in motivating, if it feels good that for you to do it after your warm up before your long run, go for it. Again, these are not necessarily fatigue inducing, or should they be? So they shouldn't interrupt what you're doing as far as what the purpose of your day is. But I would say, ideally, I like to do them after a warm up and before what you would be considered the bulk of the run, because now part of the purpose of doing them is turning the neuromuscular system on and firing muscles and recruiting more muscle fibers. So it's almost like a warm up. So you get your nice, easy warm up in, and then you do these sprints, and then you're going to feel really good for whatever you're choosing to do after that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in that respect, maybe you're doing them twice a week, and starting, 4 or 5 of them, and then building up to maybe 10, doing 10 by 15 seconds, 10 seconds. And the key is we want a lot of rest in between. We're talking
walking back to like the
yeah.
amount of, oh yes, if you're doing it by time, so you record
So maybe 2 to 3 minutes. So
okay.
it might be if you're doing a warm up and then you're out for your run, hey, do a sprint for 10 seconds and then go really easy for 2 or 3 minutes and go again.
Okay.
Okay.
You don't necessarily
Because
have to walk or stand there.
yeah. And that way you can just kind of feel like you're doing something, but you keeping on with what you're doing. But that rest is super important for 2 reasons. One, it helps produce those chemicals I talked about that are act as lubrication and helping create the chemicals we want in the body. And also you're getting a lot of rest, so then each one can be relatively fast. This shouldn't be a cardiovascular workout, where a cardiovascular workout in this sense would be very little rest.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. You might do a Tabata type of workout where it's 30 seconds fast, 30 seconds rest. That's more of a cardiovascular or stamina type of workout, where here we want just the opposite, a lot of rest.
I want to talk about rest. Well, I want to talk about warm-ups and rest. Two
Yep.
things that a lot of athletes, myself included, don't really feel like we need to do, unless like if it's my speed day, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do the warm-up. But if I'm only doing a 40-minute run, I have learned that I need to start out a little slower and warm up. But I previously used to just go right out the door, run the same pace the entire run, and end. So talk about the importance of a warm up for a runner, no matter what kind of run they're doing.
Well, I think we're maybe talking 2 different types of things.
Okay.
So one type of warm up that kind of goes hand in hand with the reasons we do sprints is to do foot core exercises before you head out. So doing some barefoot drills, balancing on your foot barefoot at home, again, helps stimulate the muscles in our feet, helps turn on the neuromuscular system between our brain and our feet that activate all our running muscles. Okay, by how we use our feet, how we train our feet, activate other parts of our middle. How we use our feet activate our glute. So by doing this before you even go out the door, now you've turned the switch on to this complete electrical system throughout your body that's firing muscles that you want to use while you're running. So I think that's kind of the most important type of warm up, is that you're turning these muscles on.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go out the door, and every run is relatively different, so if you're just going out for a nice easy run, you really don't need a warm up. I
Okay.
use heart rate, so maybe you're starting in zone 1 for 5 minutes or so, and just kind of getting everything moving, focusing on your form, your foot strike, and then you build into your steady zone 2, zone 3 run. If I'm having you go to the track, we're doing some drills and skills a little bit to, again, kind of wake up the neuromuscular system. So it's more about warming up the neuromuscular system than it being a cardiovascular type of warm up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And I think I agree. I have it does make sense just to like, you need a little bit more doing the foot core exercises, or even we are big fans of rock lobster
Yeah,
and
right.
running in place or
Yep.
marching in place.
Yep.
And I do
Yep.
feel like it does sort of that muscle memory over time. It is connecting my mind so that when I start running, I'm landing right beneath my hips. I'm not overstriding because I start slow with that, reminding me of how to move.
Yeah, I mean, running in place, as is the ultimate drill while you're at home. Take off your shoes and socks, run in place. Now you know how to strike the ground, where to strike the ground, and it's wonderful strength training.
Yeah. 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 Okay, so thinking about shoes, and I think we should bust some myths here.
Yeah.
Uh, First off, I feel like I was very nervous to start getting in because I read these stories when Born to Run came out about doing like starting my natural shoe journey, and just worried that I was going to do it wrong. So I want to first hear your perspective, and then I can share mine of like, it's not necessarily a quick fix. Like, this is something that's unique to every person, right? And everyone's going to have their own background into getting into running in natural shoes. And you, early on, you really told me your story about, how long it took. So let's dive into that.
Yeah, I think starting off, I think it's important to realize, or not realize, but to start changing our mindset of shoes. And shoes are just serving a purpose. And you hear me say it all the time. They're a tool. And so first and foremost, I use the strength tool of a minimal shoe to do just that. Is that this is a strength building tool.
Mhm.
And therefore, if we're talking about strength and you were going to tell someone what to go to the gym and what to do at the gym, it would be different for everybody, right? Based on what they've used to doing, what they're not used to doing, what they have done. So everybody's going to come into this from a different background and ability. And I would say that the exciting part is that most runners out there do not have the strength to run in a natural shoe for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time. And that might sound like a negative, but that's a great opportunity for everybody out there listening, is that if we start to see a minimal shoe, or what I like to call a natural shoe running, this is a wonderful, wonderful strength training tool that everybody can benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
Versus saying everybody should run in natural shoes all the time. That's not what I'm saying. Is that use this as a tool at first, and let it build strength, and let it benefit every type of running that you want to do.
Mm-hmm. And let's break down for people what a natural shoe is. Some people may be like, oh, does it mean it's like made with natural materials? But there are key elements. So break down the key elements and what they
are. All right, using the Zalen for an example. One, We've got a zero drop, meaning the thickness in the forefoot and the thickness in the heel is the same height. So you can see how, you know, this is the same height as here versus having a thicker heel would be more of a bigger drop. This is zero drop, okay, and very, very low to the ground, okay, and very, very flexible. So when I say natural, is that a natural shoe should allow your feet to work and stabilize naturally.
Okay.
And that's why this becomes so important, is because now our feet are the first line of defense for stabilization as we run. And if we can train the feet in a natural shoe, we're going to train our entire body in the most functional type of way for running. Okay. So that, every shoe is going to be a little different, but, and again, every shoe is going to be a little different for people's background as far as how strong they are. But the closer you can get to the ground, the better, as far as a natural running shoe.
Got it. And then how long did it take you to get into natural running? Or running in the shoe, sorry, running in the
I'm going to answer this differently, because I'm going to say I'm still doing it. My goal is never done. My goal is to always be able to get stronger and stronger, so I'm able to go longer and longer in a natural environment. Okay, so I just that, and I want to leave it there because I want people to have that mindset, is like, it's not just something that you do and achieve in 2 weeks and you're done. See it as a lifelong form of strength training.
Yep. And I got zero shoes and said, okay, I'm going to work my way through them. And I wore them for shorter runs for a year. And then you and I started working together, and I was like, great, within this next 6 months, I'm going to be able to run a 50K and do all this stuff in the minimal shoes. And you actually had some really great advice of what you talked about now, with it's not a set and end point of running in natural shoes. It's constantly a journey, and it's used as a tool, and it is a not one size fits all solution for people.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard part, because everybody wants to hear one solution or how to do it. And that's, unfortunately, everybody's going to come into this differently. So you've just got to kind of hopefully understand the true potent benefits of it, and then go out for 5 minutes and see how you feel the next day. Go out for 10 minutes and see how you feel. And now you're using this type of shoe 1, 2, 3 times a week for what I call strength running, where the purpose of your run is to go out and strength training.
Yep.
Okay. Rather than going to the gym, the best thing you can do is go out and do strength running. So now maybe we dive into how the feet affect everything else in the body. So if we're stabilizing, the further we get away from the ground in a built up shoe, the more we are not able to stabilize with our feet and our big toe and our arch. And that's where all of our stabilization starts. So the further we get away from the ground, the more we are not able to stabilize. So if you're wearing a big shoe, that might provide some comfort, but you're not able to stabilize your body very well. And what does that do? That creates tight hip flexors. That creates tight IT band trouble. That creates shortening of your Achilles. So the further we get away from the ground, the less optimal we are using our body naturally. And that's why I call it natural running, or a natural shoe. Okay. So people need to understand that, aside from a performance and a strength standpoint that we're talking about, it's going to really, developing this type of stabilization is going to take away the tug and pull that we have been brainwashed to think is normal in causing tightness with runners. You shouldn't be excessively tight. And it's how we use our feet to stabilize our entire body that will help with that.
Mhm. I think about the analogy of like jumping on your bed
Yeah.
and you're just jumping on the mattress, but you're not getting that high or anything, but it's fun and it feels great and everything. But like if you were doing a contest to see how high off the ground you were jumping on this bed, it wouldn't be that high. Whereas if you jump on the ground, it you're going to maybe have a better performance in the long run. It takes more strength to make it happen to get
Yeah.
higher. But
Our feet crave stability. They want to be stable. So
Mhm.
think of it this way too, and that was a great example. But think about, would you rather run on wet, hard sand or dry, soft sand? Take yourself to the beach, right? What would be more play if you had to go run 2 miles? Would you want to do it in soft, deep sand or hard, wet sand close to the water? You want the hard, wet sand, or would you rather run on dry um, dirt or
Yep.
mud, right? Okay. So our feet crave stability. They want to be stable. And
Mhm.
that creates stability all the way up through the hip. And so again, the further we get away from the ground, the more we're not able to stabilize.
So when you think about, so one of our great tips is like we're slowly working on running maybe with like in a way that works for us with our natural shoes. When we get into the strength, like, is there any other movements that runners could be doing either in the natural shoes or barefoot besides strides before or after a run or like on off run days that can help them so when they are running they're feeling those benefits as well?
Yeah. And I would say, first and foremost, especially those people who are short on time, the best form of conditioning, the best form of strength training is your actual running. Okay. Um, Running is our conditioning. It's running's so unique in that way. So all other sports, we use running as the conditioning for that sport, right? But running is our sport. So if you're short on time, the best form of strength training you can do is what we're just talking about, going out with a minimal shoe, a natural shoe, and doing short runs in these, because that's going to be the most potent strength. If you got more time and you want to devote a little bit more time to adding the layers of strength, any type of jumping and hopping is wonderful, wonderful strength. And we can get into why, but again, it's a, a fun, creative way to develop the most functional type of strength that we need as runners. And I think there's so much bad information out there with social media of all these exercises that we can go do in the gym that really aren't, we're just wasting our time, really.
They're not.
And for example,
Mhm.
core, okay? The best form of core strength training for runners is hopping, is running, is jumping, because we're training our core to fire when it needs to fire.
Mhm.
When we're doing other crunches and other traditional core exercises, it might be strengthening our core, but is it training it to fire when it needs to? And that's the type of strength that most runners are lacking, is
Mm.
the ability to use the strength they have.
Mhm.
And that's where jumping, hopping, one of my staple exercises is just hopping on one foot, barefoot. Okay, now we're creating good leg stiffness. We're helping train our cadence. So there's so much packed into jumping, hopping, and doing a variety of types of runs like the sprinting.
Yeah, I want to talk about leg stiffness and elasticity that you were talking about earlier. And yeah, I always think of our muscles as the pull and peel Twizzler because it's got the fiber. And in fact, I did a science project with the pull and peel Twizzler as my muscle in, I don't know, middle or high school. But
Nice.
yeah, I feel like I wish I had some here so we could be like, here's an example. I have like a band which we use
Okay. Yep.
regularly. But yeah, I feel like yeah, a lot of people don't really think that it's important for us to be, well, maybe you should explain it because I'm going to probably explain it
No,
wrong.
keep going. Keep going.
Isn't it like we want to be able to be stretch like this and absorb the impact so that versus always being like this?
Yeah. So when we talk about having, let me back up a minute. There's two components that directly relate to performance and health for runners. And performance and health should always go hand in hand. It's not one or the other. And these two components help it to go hand in hand. So one of those is our cadence or our frequency of how quickly or how often we strike the ground when we run. Okay, we want to have kind of a good balance of cadence there. And the second is leg stiffness. And leg stiffness is the ability to strike the ground. When we strike the ground, we stretch that band. So strike the ground, we stretches it. And then what happens when you stretch a rubber band and let go? It springs back, right? Yeah. So if this is the ground and this is your foot, here I'll get. So we're striking the ground, that stretches the rubber band, and then as we stretch it, we release it and it goes forward. Okay, so that's elastic energy. Okay, and having good leg stiffness allows us to land and spring off quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so having a nice we want a nice new rubber band would have, good stretchiness versus think about a rubber band that maybe has been laying in your drawer for 10 years and you haven't used it and it's crusty and you go to stretch it and it snaps. Yes. Okay. So having that good leg stiffness allows us to be really taut and to stretch that rubber band and spring off of it very, very quickly, which helps our cadence. So again, good leg stiffness. We land and we get off of it. Okay. That keeps us healthy and it reduces our ground contact time, which helps our cadence. So ultimately, the less time we spend on the ground, the better with each foot strike. So that's where good leg stiffness is really, really important. And doing the hopping and doing a jump training is very, very good to develop this leg stiffness that will also ultimately help us stay healthy, improve our performance, and help our cadence.
And that's, you said your favorite is just hopping in place on one.
Yeah, I mean, I have a ton of them, but if people, just to give people a visual, I call them leg stiffeners. So you're essentially just hopping on one leg from the same leg to the same leg to the same leg, and with a little bit of a pause. So now we're training you to land, pause, which helps train the ability to get off of it then. So we're actually asking your body to spend more time on the ground to train it to spend less time on the ground, if that makes sense.
Interesting that it's counterintuitive. So
much is counterintuitive.
Is it because when you're on the ground that extra few seconds, then you need more strength to bounce off so that when it comes to running, you're then able to run?
So great question. And this gets really nitty gritty. So there's 3 types of strength required for running and to have good leg stiffness. It's the eccentric or the landing, or think about if you're thinking of a squat, you're squatting down. That's eccentric. And coming back up or taking off is concentric.
Yep.
And in between, there's a moment in a time where you have to make a transition from going down to taking off, and that's isometric. So landing and pausing trains that isometric hold to get quicker. Okay, so that isometric strength is very, 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 very potent in strength that not a lot of people know about. And it goes into the foot. That's why all of the foot core exercises that I have people do are holding or isometric style of exercises where you're holding the exercise for the strength, because isometric strength is the most potent type of strength. What you miss with isometric strength is endurance, and that comes with your running.
Yep, it makes sense. When I do the foot core, my feet still, I mean, they are working like crazy. They're doing all this kind of stuff. And I've been doing it for almost a year now. And I am surprised sometimes. I'm thinking, have I not learned anything? But then I do look at my cadence and see that it's
Right,
faster.
right, right.
And then I do remember that, like you said, it's not like, oh, you're training to do, this 10K half marathon. And like, once you do it, it's done, the box is checked and you're good on your foot core, like that it's a constantly working thing. So do you notice if you don't do it for a while, or, like that it can still be challenging even for you? Because your
Yeah,
videos
and
make it look easy.
that's the cool thing about the foot core, or this style of strength training, is that it's similar to training your core, is that there's smaller intrinsic muscles that are very important. Therefore, you can train them often, you can train them frequently, and therefore the rewards happen very quickly. Okay. But then just the opposite happens, is if you stop doing it, you kind of go backwards very quickly. So you can train that strength very quickly, but again, if you stop doing it, it goes away quickly. So yeah.
That makes sense.
And that's again where the, training in the natural shoe environment, you take away all the padding of a shoe, and now we're really training your ability to get off. Because you're landing, there's nothing there but you and the ground, and you're training that elastic energy and all of this leg stiffness as you're running. Again, that's where it's the most functional type of strength training.
Hmm.
And again, for those out there, it doesn't have to be a 45-minute run. It could be a 10-minute run.
Hmm.
For a lot of people, 10 minutes is going to be the most potent strength training they've done.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think a lot of people may be attached to their shoes,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with having your go-to running shoes that you need to run with. These are the ones you PR'd in and everything. So we aren't, like you're saying, that we don't need to take away these shoes that we love, that are the ones that we perform with, but we should just be maybe adding another shoe to the mix for a specific purpose.
Yeah, again, see it as a tool. If you've got your favorite PR shoe, that's your performance shoe. That's when you're going out and doing your tempo workout and you're racing and you want high performance, knowing that you're going to lose that stability and that strength. You want to be on the other end and have your strength tool here and doing your strength runs. And again, for some people, it might be 5 or 10 minutes at a time, and you just build through time. Just same concept as your long run. If you've taken time off, you're not going to go do a 20-mile run right away. You're going to start with 5, go to 10, 15 to 20. Same concept applies when you're building this type of strength. Start out with 5 minutes, see how you feel the next day. If the calves are sore, hey, that's a great sign that you need that strength, you know. And that, again, see it as a positive. If you can't run in this very long, see it as a positive and a great way for you to get so much better with very, very little added amount of time. Or again, you're just replacing what you're doing with something else, and you're still running.
Hmm. Yeah, this is so great, Eric. And, especially that you have this whole background, and, you work with different athletes of all levels. And I think it's a really good takeaway for people that it's not an all or nothing approach. And yeah, it really is a practice for your entire running career.
I think that's the take home, is that with marketing these days, we all want that label, and we all want it to be all or nothing. See it as a tool, and it's not all or nothing. It's not and this one or that one. It's both. And what I do know is that by training the feet, by training leg stiffness, and training the strength, you're going to supersede a lot of the negative aspects that happen from using a higher platform shoe.
Amazing. And for people that they've just heard our awesome conversation, and now they want to know where they can find these exercises, where they can find more tips, where can people find the Born to Run coach Eric Orton and, learn more about your philosophy, get some exercise ideas and that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's pretty easy. One, I think the go-to is to go to my YouTube channel. I've got all so much resource there, whether it's exercises that you're talking about or vlog style of everything about running. And aside from YouTube, I got my website, ericorton.com, that has more information there, but has all list of all my training programs that are attached to Training Peaks. So if you're on Training Peaks, or if you're not on Training Peaks, you can be. Got lots of training programs there to check out.
Yes, and for those that don't know, Training Peaks is an awesome app. They have a web-based platform. You can put in your workouts. Eric has already turnkey created programs. If you've bought the Born to Run 2 book, it actually comes with the 90-day run form boot camp, right?
You got
And
it.
it's a great opportunity. So if all you have to do, I don't even know where it is. Oh, this, right?
Yep. Yeah. Just scan the barcode.
Yeah, you just scan the QR code and you get your free 90-day run free program. And it has videos of demonstrations, and then obviously follow Eric to learn more. Well, awesome. Thank you to our partner, Eric Orton. And we are excited for more.
Yeah. I loved it. This is just wetting the whistle, right?